Hello, it's Peter Wright and Kathleen Beauvais with another episode of the Yakking Show. This is a show that brings you more actionable business tips and ideas than you'll find practically anywhere else in one place on the internet. And we do that by bringing you interesting guests. Today is no exception. But first, let's introduce Kathleen. Hi, Kathleen. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Peter. Thank you so much. And thank you all so very much for tuning in to our show. We so appreciate you. And as Peter mentioned, we do have another special guest with us today. We are very excited to have Jamie Royce with us today. Hello, Jamie. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Jamie is the CEO and founder of Mindcloud. This is a company that helps business leaders automate and scale their businesses with simple software solutions. Let's jump in. Jamie, most businesses have a full suite of software that they use for their day-to-day operations. But what you do is help these various programs communicate with each other. Exactly how do you do that?
Great. Yeah. So the concept is integration, right? Integration means taking disparate things and making them work together as one. So as you mentioned, the modern business owner has, I think the survey I recently did, at least 8 platforms that your average, even small to medium-sized business owner is using themselves, let alone staff and technical people could be even more. But imagine having to do the old swivel chair between one screen to the next,
right?
And copy and paste and the manual data entry and all the things that you would think nowadays with all this amazing modern technology where you can say a statement into your computer and get like a fully amazing artistic picture off of just some words. You would think that we could automate a manual task of copying ones and zeros from one program and putting them in another. Yet most businesses have up to 40% of their staff time spent on these type of tedious data entry tasks.
Wow, 40%. That's huge.
Wow.
Yeah. And in some cases, we had a couple of staff that were their function was entirely copying and pasting, exporting from one platform, importing it into another. And that was their whole job. And with one of our first customers, we were able to entirely replace their functions. And those staff were able to move on to other important tasks that weren't these mind-numbing robotic processes. And nowadays, I mean, jumping right into modern AI and ChatGPT, if you're doing something like that, if you're doing a robotic task, you will be replaced by a robot.
Sure.
Right.
So our company is working with business owners to automate and streamline all of these type of robotic, manual, tedious data entry type of tasks, connecting their software together, which is what I've been doing for over 20 years professionally, is systems integration, building processes to automatically move ones and zeros from one point to another. And whatever the computer allows you to do with a keyboard, you probably could do in one manner or another in an automated fashion.
That's incredible. So in other words, so if somebody, most businesses, I would say all businesses have an accounting software. If you're a manufacturing company, you have inventory. It's integrating all of these systems together so that instead of having to go into each separately to do a bit of business, it's all just connected to one another. And each of the softwares reads each other, or they communicate with each other.
It's like there's no one software that does everything. Even your biggest ERPs don't do everything. And then, you know, with modern advancements happening all the time, there might be a really good app that does one thing that you really like for marketing or for chatting or for other things. You really like that, but it doesn't talk with your other one. So then you inevitably are making sacrifices by having some kind of either data silo where you just have 2 different systems that don't talk, or you have someone trying to synchronize the systems manually. Both not optimum.
Wow.
Wow. How long
So,
does it typically, I'm just curious, how long does it typically take for, if you have say a small to medium-sized business that typically has around 8 different programs, for your team to come in and sort of integrate them? That I would think that's pretty labor
Well,
intensive, isn't it?
it's funny you brought that up. That's the reason why this has been not really known about by small and medium-sized businesses, because it was so cost prohibitive and it would take so much time. And it was literally like building computer programs from scratch every time a company wanted to do that. Now, what we did was utilizing the latest modern technology that's available. Me and my team, we built a platform that utilizes all of these latest breakthroughs that make it possible to do it it's an agile method where you just have components that do one thing perfect, and then you have another component that does something perfect, and then those two are connected, and then pretty soon you have this whole platform that does exactly what you want, but you didn't have to spend 2 years researching, developing, and building for what might eventually work. It was one thing that does one thing perfectly, that works, and you have it up and running within a few days. It's tested, up and running, live. We're talking a couple of weeks instead of many, many months for each component. You do it that way, you can actually iterate through and build a very sophisticated platform light years faster than what's out there.
Sure. Because I would imagine a lot of the principles stay the same across a wide range of industries and services. For instance, if you have a good way of linking what you mentioned just now, accounting and inventory for a automotive parts manufacturer, the same would apply for someone making something totally different, right? The principles would still be similar.
Yeah, I like to tell my clients that it's all ones and zeros.
Yep.
When you down to it, doesn't matter what industry, it doesn't matter what type of data, it's just ones and zeros, and they need to go from one place to another. And our job is to bring these software programs into communication with each other. Just, to just respond to what you were asking earlier, it's been cost prohibitive because these software platforms that were built 10 or 20 years ago and are still around, there are these things called integration platforms. And the common term you might have heard is called an IPAS, integration platform as a service. Now, traditionally, that term means your Salesforce MuleSoft program, or a one that Dell originally had. They sold it to someone else. It was called Boomi. Now, these software platforms were built decades ago almost at this point. And when you have a platform that the underlying foundation is decades old, it's much harder to iterate and go through a new development cycle to implement some amazing modern technology. You end up only coloring the surface of it or putting decorations on, but the core foundation is layer upon layer of almost like a Frankenstein approach of you had something originally and then some new thing came up and you added another layer to it. And then pretty soon you got 5 layers deep on a platform that is kind of slow. It's kind of clunky. It doesn't respond really well, and it's not really user friendly. And we took the approach of let's build something that is cost effective for a small and medium-sized business who could take advantage of that same technology that the big enterprise companies have been using for over a decade in these integration platforms. Mindcloud is a next generation integration platform as a service.
Okay, got it. So you've just answered what I was going to ask you, and that was, well, sort of answered. What was the biggest mistake that small to medium-sized business owners make when they're adding on to their existing IT system? And we all make, even as people as small as us, make the same mistakes. We say, "Oh, I like that," and buy it and start using it without thinking that maybe it's not going to work so well in partnership with that which we're already using. Is that what the biggest problem, as you said, or is it something more complicated than that?
I think that's a component of the problem. Staying up to date with modern software and latest technology is definitely a big problem. I think the biggest problem is business owners not even having the concept that it's possible, not really being aware of the magic that computer technology makes available. It's really to the point of, if you can imagine it, it's very likely it's possible.
It's possible. Right. I mean,
I run into a barrier sometimes with, people that are kind of stuck in their ways, where they're happy to do it this way. And it's, manual processes and using many different systems, but they're the ones stopping it, not their technology. It's the mindset that they're satisfied at whatever level they are at. They will not ever take advantage of this because they don't even want to change. So I guess it's having a desire and a need of change is a first requirement. And then it's a willingness that the impossible might be possible.
Okay. I got an example of that. If I think back, I'm getting on in years a little bit. When I started work way before computers mainframes were just starting to be used by huge companies. I went to work for a company that all the correspondence was done by secretaries on typewriters, either golf ball or daisy wheels. This is how long ago that was. And I can remember every letter or memo had 3 colored copies to be filed, 1 numerical, 1 alphabetical, and 1, I can't remember. And then we brought in word processors, state of the art, those huge things, and on those massive floppy disks. And after about a year, we realized that one secretary was more or less permanently employed filing this 3rd paper copy, having not realized there's now an electronic copy on disk, right? So there's exactly what you're saying. The habit just kept going, kept someone busy doing mind-numbing stuff. Yeah,
exactly. I first got into this world about 20 years ago, and it was a similar thing where I was in a mailroom with 20 other staff colleagues, and a big mailing had just gone out, and we were taking the return, the yellow sticker that the post office gives for a bad address. So we were taking these yellow stickers and searching for the person on the list and then marking it as an undeliverable address. And this went on for weeks and weeks, and it was so mind-numbing, but it was very important because if the next mailing was going to go out and you hadn't cleaned up the last one, you're throwing money in the toilet. So I knew how important this was, and I wanted to help, but I always, ever since being a little kid, had this idea of my imagination is just out of this world. I always am looking for, how to be creative and solve things with unusual, crazy ways. And I'm like, there's got to be a way to do this automatically. I reached out to the USPS headquarters at the time. This is 2002 and actually 2001, and found out they had an electronic way, just like with you. And the electronic filing was happening. They had a way to give you all the return address information with your ID of who it was mailed to on a floppy disk. So I set up this process. So I set it up on an FTP site. So I didn't even have to get a floppy disk. So they would upload it. I built a program to connect to the FTP site, grab the data, match it up to our mailing list, and mark it as undeliverable. That whole thing took only a few weeks to build, this whole program that did that and replaced the work of 20 staff. That was 6 weeks time. And it took me that time. I was just like, this is so powerful. And the fact that nobody else knew of this, or even that it was possible, I knew that eventually that was probably the spark that started Mindcloud so many years later. But it's just that, curiosity and willingness to find out how to not just be dumb and stupid about what you're doing. There's got to be a better way.
Good for you. My goodness.
Excellent. No, very good.
So, Jamie, what area of most businesses requires your attention first? Or is there one?
Well, the first thing is I usually tell my customers and potential customers, do a review of all of your processes that are requiring any kind of repetitive tasks. Any processes that somebody is copying and pasting. Look for all the Control-C, Control-Vs that are happening across your whole organization. And maybe it's impossible to replace it, but maybe it's possible. But just do an assessment and tally up the hours by week and by month of how much time is being spent on these type of things. One client I did that with, it was 1,440 hours a year were being spent on just copy and paste of their various staff.
Wow.
And that it was almost a full salaried employee's number of hours just on copy and paste. That organization didn't want to upgrade to a better software that could automate it because of the cost. Yet the hidden cost was the salaried hours that were being spent copy paste with a more modern solution was a fraction of the cost of what their salary was to pay a staff member to do it. So that's the first thing, is a review of what all is your processes, what of your processes could be automated, or a step back, just look at where you're doing repetitive tasks. Any of those, just do a review. And I say that this is the hidden growth killer of a company that wants to scale. They will not scale exponentially if they do not find each of those points and replace them with automated processes. You'll have to hire more staff if you want to grow. And if you don't get out of that rut, you will never scale exponentially. You can only grow linearly, if at all, but you'll only grow linearly unless you replace all of those points with automated processes.
Very true.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Again, it goes back to a lot of these people, a lot of these managers don't even realize that there's a different way it could be done, right? They just think, oh, this is how we've always done it. This is all we know. And they have no way of knowing that there is a better way, right?
Yeah, it's hard to get somebody to open their eyes when all they've had their whole life is their eyes closed. How do you convince them that, there's possibilities out there and there's ways to do things better if all they believe is that, no, this is just how we've always done it? And I think it takes a certain type of personality to kind of help a company get over that, whether it's internally or externally. That probably is the biggest barrier of companies actually really scaling, is getting over that sort of fixed way of doing things.
Right.
Wow, that's interesting. So, Jamie, with the sort of increasingly rapid development of new systems and a new technology, and I'm looking at AI in particular and ChatGPT, which has all been happening it's been happening for a long time, but we've become a lot more aware of it in the last few months. Are you finding your clients, your customers need to review all their systems more frequently than they did, say, 5 or 6 years ago?
I think that exponential growth of the technology also needs that same exponential looking and reviewing. It's not to say that it has to be that way, but in an ideal world, you would always be staying on top of what are the latest trends, what are the ways to automate, what are the ways to replace tedious tasks with better ways, just like back in the day when they made that electronic filing mechanism instead of doing 3-color copies. If nobody was looking for that, there might have been companies out there that just kept filing them hard copy forever.
Oh yeah. I know there were. Yeah.
So, ChatGPT and AI, while it is a extreme buzz right now, it's not going to go away. That technology is going to continue to advance in an exponential manner. It's just going to keep growing like that. And there's the shift, or the paradigm shift, that really needs to change is understanding the potentials of the computer, understanding the potentials of software, understanding the potentials of these LLMs, large language models, which is what ChatGPT and these new AIs are all based on. These are all things that have been concepts 20 plus years and more ago, with machine learning and data modeling and all these things, that only with the resources of today and companies that had enough multi-million-dollar budgets to build the computers, it was just never possible before.
Sure.
And it's only going to get more and more like that as processing power is less and less expensive, and it's you can compute that much more. But yeah, I think that getting that shift from what's possible and to be willing to see solutions, that's the thing that needs to shift the most, regardless of if it's exponentially parallel to technology or not. It's got to start from opening your eyes to the possibilities.
So just something, you triggered something in my mind there, that when you mentioned big budgets that have made these latest developments possible, does this mean it will squeeze out some of the, as we go forward, will some of the small innovators be squeezed out, or and all the development be concentrated in fewer and fewer big companies, or not?
When I said that, I think that more specifically, you've got only a handful of companies that are big enough to have their own large language models with enough data. So you've got OpenAI, you've got, now you've got Bard and a few others. Those are pillars that will spawn off thousands and hundreds of thousands of applications that can do things. The underlying technology it's still the same technology. They're just trying to compete with each other.
Okay. But as you say, that'll spin off the ability of many more smaller operators to come up with new stuff using those pillars. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Let me give you an example of because so at Mindcloud, we've only been around for a couple of years, but we've used modern technology every chance we get, and generative AI and these LLMs are no exception. I'll give you an example of how we're able to be so cost effective and fast and offer this to small and medium-sized businesses. An example is what would take a programmer 2 to 4 weeks to build, research, documentation, see how you can connect one software to another, read all this stuff. These are things that are available on the internet. These are things that are available to these large language models, which means we can programmatically instruct the computer to do what a developer was spending 2 to 4 weeks doing. And it's done in a matter of seconds or minutes.
Yeah.
So
I'm
for example, building a new connector to Walmart.com, and I'm in Salesforce. The first one took us 4 weeks to build. Now, if we were building it today, the whole infrastructure of how to connect to Walmart could have been done in a matter of minutes in the code, in the programmatic code, in the format that will actually run a service that I could offer customers. We still have to test it, and build on top of it, but it's kind of like the legwork or the grunt work is fully replaced by AI, and we can do that, and we have that built into our process, so we can be so much faster. But if I was working at one of these other companies that I mentioned before that have a Frankenstein layered of archaic system, you couldn't do that because their whole foundation is based on a different structure. It's like the Titanic. You can't turn the Titanic fast enough, and we're in this little speedboat that's just kind of zipping along and is able to get through all these obstacles and come out with hundreds of connections when it might take them 1 or 2 months to come out with one connection, and we can come out with hundreds.
Okay, that makes sense. So lots of opportunities for smaller businesses then, if they're fast thinkers. Good.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So you may have already answered this with OpenAI, but is there one new app or program that businesses should consider using?
Definitely, if they have not played around with ChatGPT, OpenAI, if they have not played around with that, that's the first obvious. I mean, it went from 0 to 100 million users it's the fastest growing app and technology in the history of computing.
Amazing.
And if you haven't already tried it out, things that you can replace, like research, gather data, summarize data. An example the other day is I took all of my testimonials that I had gotten on our website, and I said, summarize these for me in a simple statement that kind of gives an idea of what service we offer. I did that, half a second later, I had the most amazing summary that I would not have intuitively thought. And it just kind of gives it there. And you could use that. And you don't want to just copy and paste from AI to the internet. You don't want to be one of these bloggers that's just like generating content, because the thing that's different about a human is you've got a sentient being that is running the show. We don't want a bunch of robots just talking to each other.
No.
There's got to be that sentient piece, even if you're using the tool of AI to help you to do work that, you know, makes your job faster. You still got to look at it and decide, is it the right thing to even do? Or, you know, add your life into it. So that's something that, you know, you see some people lose sight of, is that AI, it's not intelligence, it's artificial intelligence. And it does not and will never think for itself. It's taking all the data that exists and it's predicting what would be done based on all these scenarios that exist in the history. But to come up with a creative thought that is not based on history is impossible. It can only predict based on everything that is there. And that's something that, you know, people that are worried that AI is going to take over the world and all these things may lose sight of. It's a tool. Use it, take advantage of it. It's a hammer when you didn't have a hammer. You know, it's a screw gun when you didn't have a screw gun. It's a computer when you were filing everything hard copy. Learn to use the tool, but don't lose sight that it will never replace a human being as long as you're not doing a robotic task. If you, you know, it goes back to the concern for people losing their jobs by, you know, from ChatGPT or people. If you were a robotic worker and only did, you know, following instructions and didn't add any creative thought into the process, you will get replaced, because that's exactly what ChatGPT can do.
Right.
Yeah. No, very true.
So it's like move up the intelligence and you will not get replaced.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what our feeling is. We're using it as well, but we don't publish anything straight out of ChatGPT. We use it as a skeleton, and we put our own thoughts and add on a bit behind it. But it certainly saves time. You're right. So, Jamie, let's get back to, you've told us all about IT and the Mindcloud. Let's get back to the Jamie story. You sort of gave us a hint that you were in this mailroom of 20 people, and you came up with a system in a couple of weeks based. Very early system, and you replaced the 20 people. Is that the trigger that got you to where you are now in Mindcloud?
That was a pivotal moment where I saw the value and in the real world, what using computers can do in the real world. It affected me. It wasn't something I heard about or saw somebody else experience. I personally was having to type in and spend those hours of my life, and I hated it. I hated the concept of wasting hours of my life with something that I could do faster. And that was ever since I was a kid. You know, if there's a way that I could do it faster, or if there's something where I have this inkling that, you know, it's wasting time, or there's a more, or possibly a better way to do it, that I would always look for that. So when I was in this, I happened to be in this position where I was able to use that curiosity. I wasn't a computer programmer. I was familiar and I was experienced in some things, but I was not professionally trained in programming. I was just extremely curious and always wanting to find out things. And I reached out to the post office and found out that they had this thing. I had to learn a programming language to be able to process this data back and forth. That took a few, bit of time to learn, but I looked, I learned, and then I applied it. And that's kind of how the process went. But that was definitely a pivotal moment where I saw a tangible benefit in my life that saved me dozens and dozens of hours that I could do something that I enjoy better.
All right. So what was the next step after that? Were you still in the corporate world then?
I spent 20 years in the corporate world. COVID, I had the opportunity to transition. I was working remotely for another company, and I saw some of the new technologies that were out there, and I hit a point where I could not execute my ideas fast enough within the corporate structure. I wanted to help a lot of people and help expand businesses. And, I've always had that itch, and I had this opportunity. So I started it on the side on my off hours as a consultant, and I was testing it to see, would this work? If I could use modern connectivity to connect data together, would somebody pay for it without quitting my full-time job? And I did this very carefully. I only moved off of my full-time job when I replaced the income on my side job.
Side job, right. Sensible.
And then after a few months, I got my friend who also had a full-time job, and in a couple hours at night and on the weekends, he did the more heavy lifting of the computer work that I didn't know how to do. I did everything I could, and I can learn stuff very easily, but I'm not a professional programmer up to the level that he is. He's an architect. He's able to design enterprise systems and all this kind of stuff. So we just started together and said, every job that I get in, we'll split 50-50. We'll work on together, and let's keep it going until we can replace our full-time jobs. I managed to switch off first. Then a year later, he was able to move off of his full-time job and work at Mindcloud full-time. We have a growing team now, all remote. It's all remote. And yeah, we got funded a few months back. So we were able to take the momentum and kind of put a little rocket fuel behind there. But we did it in this way that was never, we never grew faster than we could deliver. That was just my principle. I didn't want to have so much money or so much staff or so much business that a customer would have a bad feeling like, wow, these guys are just growing so fast that they can't service me. Our whole thing from the beginning was this really white glove, high touch. We do it all. We don't expect you to build anything or use your tech team to do anything. We will come in and set up your integrations. We'll connect all your software. We'll get it running, and we'll manage it from then on forward. We have an annual fee for that. So they can, for less than that, what they would pay to hire a part-time developer to do it themselves, we're an integration partner that they can count on to have their systems fully connected and running at all times. Somebody to go to, that if there's ever anything that needs to change or get tweaked or fixed, we do that within, we have a 24-hour response time. If there's feature updates, we turn that around very fast as well. We don't have a huge support team offshore that, doesn't really understand what you're talking about. Everybody is, we're small enough at this point, but we don't ever want to lose that, that high touch, high service, and where companies can rely on us to just be their partner. So anyway, we've managed to grow up to this point at that level. And in the last 2 months, we doubled again in size from earlier this year.
Wow.
It's been 700% growth from last year to this year in total.
Oh,
and
congratulations.
Excellent.
That is unbelievable.
Wonderful. Very good. It's lovely to hear stories like that. Really.
Well,
congratulations.
we are running short on time, but I know you have a burning question. So why don't
I have my burning question for Jamie.
Yes,
Jamie, this is something we ask all the business people, successful people that come on our show. In your experience, and you've had the corporate world, you've had right back to the manual, mind-numbing, clerical stuff, and now you've had your own business for a while and you've been a consultant. All the people you've come across, is there one characteristic, habit, or mindset that sets the successful leaders apart from those who remain average or never really get out of the rut? Is it one thing or more complicated than that?
I would say it is one thing that I've noticed, and it's that insatiated desire to grow. The most successful people that we work with, and we are selective, we want to work with those people that are aggressively wanting to grow and expand and do big things. The people that are content versus the people that have this insatiated thirst for growth and expansion is the differentiator. If you're in this content group, they're probably not our client. If they're in this other group, they're like, we want to grow, we want to expand. How do we do it? I have these goals. I think they're working in the future while the other group is working in today or the past.
Right. Excellent. Excellent. Very good. Thank you for
so
that.
much.
Yeah, back to you, Kathleen.
Yes, thank you so much for being on the show today, Jamie. Really, congratulations to you and your team.
Oh, absolutely.
But how do people contact you?
Easiest is to go to our website. It's mindcloud.co. There's a big button that says speak to a human or book a free consultation, right? And it pops up our calendar, and you just pick a time and you talk to me, talk to one of our staff, and we'll do a free consultation to review what your business processes are going right now. And we're very transparent. We'll tell you this is what it's going to cost to do that. And if it makes sense, we get started right away.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much,
Yes.
Jamie.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you also very much for tuning in to our show. If anyone is interested in being a guest on our show, please visit us at theyakkingshow.com. All you need to do is click on the contacts tab where you will find a short application form. We'd love to hear from you. And please, if there are any topics you'd like us to cover, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.